She's the chief engineer at Kenya Pipeline Company. This week, we speak to Yolanda Muyonga on what it takes to break biases and rise in a male-dominated sector. This is She Means Business. I am your host, Claire Munde. Hi, Yolanda.
Hi, how are you, Claire?
I'm well, thanks. Welcome to She Means Business.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So we're going to start this interview in an unorthodox manner. So I was reading about you. You're the chief engineer at Kenya Pipeline Company, in charge of research and innovation. What does your day look like? What do you do?
Okay, I'll say this. First of all, I handle projects from end to end. A project has the project life cycle, yeah? So you start with project initiation, project planning, then there's the implementation side, which is the supervision of the project. There's the monitoring and reporting of the project. And then there's the closure. And all these stages are very detailed. When you talk about planning, you're talking about finances, time, Gantt charts, how long it will take. So in terms of project planning, you think of aspects like the financial appraisal, the risk, you look at risks before even they occur. You think about stakeholder management and engagement, because like a company like Kenya Pipeline has to interact with various stakeholders in the industry and also internal stakeholders, yeah? Then more than that, now that we're moving into the space of AI and very fast development, we also have to keep up with these new trends, And so in terms of research and innovation, we are always looking for better ways to do things, Even when you're talking about the project management aspect, you think of like, okay, in terms of like the initiation, if you're talking about financial, there has to be ways to monitor it. So which instruments are using to monitor this? When you're talking about risk management, when you're talking about stakeholder engagement, you cannot keep on doing it the same old way. Even in terms of like tracking movement of fuel, you always have to keep on getting better. So it ties in very well, first of all, to have the technical expertise to handle projects, that is engineering. And I'll talk about like for me, I have training in different aspects. Engineering is my core expertise. However, I've done a bit of finance, I've done environmental, and I've done, things like leadership and management. So you have to be able to look at a project, first of all, on, I don't say end to end, but let's say end to end, yeah? And then more than that, also analyze the new technologies that are coming up. And also we are involving a lot of like young people in that space.
Okay. So Yolanda, you've been in the STEM industry for more than 10 years. I'd like you to give us a brief overview of the steps that you took to get to where you are right now in your current role.
Okay, thank you so much, Claire, for that question. I'll say, when I look back at my journey in retrospect, I feel that STEM has always been a part of me. And I'll say that for me, my mom was a maths teacher. And she really used to train us a lot in maths. From when we were kids, I remember instances where, she'd bring a cup and say, I want a half of this, and I want a third of this, from before I even went to school. So I always used to know, and my mind used to think in terms of maths. And I excelled in it in primary school, and I think even the teachers then spotted it very early and encouraged it. And when I went to high school, I knew that in science, there were like these three stems of science. There was physics, biology, and chemistry. But I could very early on pick on that physics is the one that has a lot of mathematics in it, So as much as we're being told like to pick subjects, I knew that I'll for sure pick physics as one of my core subjects. And in high school, I was the chair of the physics club, and I got a lot of mentorship from my teachers then and encouragement. I excelled in it, and when I finished now my high school, I chose engineering as my first choice for university. And I remember then we took we used to take 1 year break before we joined university. So then people used to go for the short courses, So my father, who is actually also very instrumental in my journey, took me to Strathmore. So I went and did my CPAs there. I did part 1, that is section 1 and 2. And then I joined university now to study civil engineering. While I was studying civil engineering in third and fourth year, we had to go for our attachments. So in third year, I went for attachment to the Ministry of Roads. And in my fourth year, I went to Kenya, KPLC, Kenya Power, yeah, for my attachments. I finished my degree, and then a few months later, I got a job at Ministry of Public Works. I started at Ministry of Public Works as a graduate engineer, and through the years, I rose all the way to senior superintending engineer. And when I was in Ministry of Public Works, I also got registered as a professional engineer. And I also, in the ministry, after a certain period, you have to do some courses. So we used to do management courses, and then all the way when you become senior superintending, you have to have done some leadership courses. So that was also that's where I also practiced like management and leadership courses. What else? Well, also while in the ministry, we used to do environmental impact assessments for projects, yeah? So they also took us for an environmental impact assessment course. And from there, the more you practice with projects, you become an environmental expert. So I became a lead environmental expert. I was in the ministry, which I feel like was also where I got my foundation in engineering. So I was there for about 8 years. And then I now moved to Rural Electrification and Renewable Energy Corporation, REREC. And from there, I feel I got a national outlook, because REREC does a lot of projects in the rural areas. So I got to travel to very remote areas and got to serve undeserved communities. After that, I now became chief engineer at Kenya Pipeline Company, chief engineer of projects, and now research and innovation.
Okay,
yeah.
So throughout those years, you said you did some management courses and you did a bit of CPA and so on and so forth. You know, sometimes they say somebody who's very good at technical sometimes struggles with leadership. What have been some of the things that you've had to do to make sure that as good as you are at the technical side, when it comes to being a chief engineer, which is now a leadership position, you're able to balance those? Did those come naturally to you, or did you have to put some extra effort, like you said you did some courses in leadership and so on and so forth?
Okay, I'll say that as you move up in terms of like project management, which I had been doing so much in the ministry, you also have to be able to look at projects like holistically. You have to look at them, because all those are actually anchors of a project. When you're looking at a project, you have to think about the financial appraisal, you have to think of the risk involved in a project, you have to think about the stakeholders, and also, like now, of course, environmental. So I feel that when you do these other courses, they tie in very well with your core course. My core course is engineering. However, there's also a lot of, okay, you have to do the environmental impact assessment. So it helps to look at it from the environmental aspect, the financial aspect. In terms of leadership, you have to manage teams, you know, and also just to lead a project, yeah? So I feel that when you do these other courses, you become a T-shaped individual, yeah? More than an I-shaped, because your core is in engineering, but with the T-shape, you can actually understand a project like from all angles. And also it helps, I feel, that when you're in these teams, you know, when you go for these meetings, you have people from different sectors. You're not so lost, you know? You can, if someone talks about finances, you're able to understand it. If someone's talking about environment, you can understand it. And it also helps you to contribute, you know? Because I feel that when you have just one core skill, you feel that I can only contribute when they're talking about the technical side. And I'll say that in terms of now, like when you tie it now into leadership, you're supposed to be able to zoom out. Huh? You're supposed to zoom out and look at it like, okay, from this angle, from that angle, and not just the technical space. And then also I'll say, like, for the management and leadership skills, it also helps with people management. Because as you move up the technical skills, they're still there, but they're not, the core skills are actually the people management. So it helps to have those leadership skills, because you know you're not leading, you're leading projects, but you're leading people and projects. Yeah.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about education, because you've said it's been a core part of your life and your career journey.
Yeah.
You're doing a PhD right now.
Yeah.
Tell us what your research topic is about and what was the motivation behind you deciding to go and get a doctorate.
Okay, nice. I'll start with my research topic. My research topic is actually on renewable energy, and more so the use of green renewable energy in housing projects. Right now we are doing affordable housing projects, and we are trying to incorporate a lot of, I am actually trying to incorporate a lot of green energy use in affordable housing. When you think about green energy, you know, I don't know, you think about like the big ones, you know, the geothermal, the wind, but when you talk about like buildings, you know, sometimes you walk into a building and you see that there's a lot of use of windows. You know, you're not thinking about like natural light. When you think about like when you go into a room and you have these sensors for the electricity, you know, or water. So I know in Kenya, a lot of green energy and renewable energy sources have been used in hotels. But when you think of buildings, it's not really, I mean, not buildings, when you think about affordable housing projects, it's not really been calculated in their designs, yeah? So I'm trying to incorporate now the green energy that we know, you know, just the ones of saving water, like collection of water, into the affordable housing. Because right now we're doing very many projects, the affordable housing, it's good to incorporate that into those such projects.
Yeah, and what would you say as we're talking about this affordable housing and basically making sure that we have good buildings? You talked about the windows, and we have a lot of sick buildings, what they call sick buildings. So how do you balance between making sure there are a lot of buildings and people can have housing, and making sure that the buildings are not sick? We say children are not getting vitamin D. There's no sunlight. So how do you balance that, even as we talk about energy?
Okay, I'll talk about like, as you said, right now we're getting a lot of like apartments and affordable housing. So it is also thinking about ways to incorporate green spaces into the buildings. And more than that, if you go like to, I'll say even like this construction where you can do green walls. People only think about the surfaces that are, you know, at the bottom. But we have like gardens that can be done even at the rooftop. You know, there's a way to incorporate green spaces into buildings. That's not just that we look for a garden space, you know, because now we're looking at the vertical spaces. With more buildings coming up, we're not looking at just the, you know, the physical layout of the land, but we also think of how to use the vertical spaces to incorporate into these green buildings. And when you talk about sick buildings, it's usually, as you said, that there's more use of concrete, you know, when they say concrete jungle, and less use of the green spaces. But you find that in developed countries, you can find even gardens on the 4th floor, you know? They don't necessarily have to be like, we have a garden here, we have a building here. So I'd say that even in my project, in my PhD, I'm also thinking of how to use green spaces for the vertical buildings that are coming up.
Okay. Okay, let's talk about women in STEM and some of the challenges you have faced. You said that you're very passionate about mentorship and making sure the next cohort or number of women who are coming up are able to find their space. You know, even at the beginning of this interview, you spoke about going home and people say it's a he because they can't fathom that it's a woman who is a chief engineer. So within your journey, what have been some of the challenges you have faced that are unique to you because you are a woman, and how have you been able to overcome them?
Okay, I'll talk about like some challenges that are unique to me and to other women, and I'll also incorporate in a way women in STEM and also women maybe in just generally the working industry. I'll say that one, the first challenge I feel I can talk about is unconscious bias, yeah? And that is because of the numbers, you know, women in STEM are 30%, less than 30%. In engineering, we're talking about graduate engineers being 14%, and women in the professional women registered engineers are at 11%. And at the consulting engineering level, they're only at 4%. And we even talk about like now the engineering firms, the numbers get even less, yeah? So I'll say that since engineering is such a technical, it's a technical subject or profession, field, I feel that generally even in society, people have this cultural and unconscious bias. And the funny thing is, it's not just one gender that has this, you know? even for us women, it's easy to actually picture, when you're told to picture an engineer, the first picture that comes to your mind is that it's going to be a man, And I'll say that, let me just backtrack a bit. This cultural bias starts very early, The other day I was thinking about, like when you go to a supermarket, I don't know if like when you go to a supermarket, if you go to the boys section, you'll see Legos. You'll see Legos there. You'll see toys that are very technical, But when you go to the girls section, even you'll just know that this is a girls section. You'll see dolls, and I think the first thing that you'll ask is there an African doll? I think that's the farthest that you can think. But there are girls who are good in maths, who are good in technical spaces, but then it's not advertised to them like this is a way you can do it. You're like, yeah, you're good in maths, yes. But how is it in the society? In the society, do people see women being good in maths? Do they see these role models? Do they see like, okay, she's in this technical space, Because as I said, this unconscious bias is not just the one gender that has it. It's almost like it's a culture. So I'll say that's one challenge. And it also affects how you show up at work. I'll tie it to the second challenge that women in engineering have experienced, and that is in terms of the jobs that they're given. So you'll get the employment, you'll be in the industry, but then they'll also give you the softer skills of engineering, You'll find that you'll be told to do coordination, which is also a very necessary skill, and also things like report writing, minute taking, stakeholder engagement, like go and talk to people, However, the technical skills, you find that they have a preference for a certain number. And I'll actually backtrack a bit. This bias and this starts actually even in the university. Like when you think about it, like when I was in university, we were 4 women out of a class of 45 then. And so already, even when you're working in teams, you have to almost ask, like, can I join your team, when they say 10 teams. And the boys have already formed like their club. And then also, like, when you start working, you find that those numbers translate. Like, I'll say, like, when you get employed, it's very common to find you're 4 out of 40, You're the 4 ladies. So that bias already starts, like, from education, when you start working, and then now when you go out into the society. So it's not just, it's something that even people see that the numbers are not there. And I'll say that how I feel it affects, like, the choice of work that you're given, it usually plays now later on, because when you start your engineering career, after a certain number of years, you're supposed to do the exam. And one of the requirements of the exam is actually to have gotten some hours in the site, So you'll find that it's usually like what you should you do the professional exam after 3 years, but you've been writing reports and you've been coordinating, and the men have been going to site. And for women also, when we talk about, like, now let's talk about gender, it's also the time when maybe you're thinking of starting a family, So the first 3 years, at least before you've started the family, I feel that you should be on the site, get that site experience. So you find that sometimes women struggle with that registration, and that's how it now shows into the numbers. Because the 3 years, you've not been on site, you've not been doing the site visits and the technical stuff. And it's not actually usually because of your competence, because for sure if you've studied engineering, you'll find that you are good in school. And actually maybe all through, you are good in school. So it's not about your competence. You're quite honestly very merit-based to be there. But when this experience is like when you don't go to site, you struggle to get those hours to do the professional exam. And that's now when it shows up in those numbers of 14 becoming 11, becoming 4, Because it's usually something like with the experience now in the field. And I'll say that, let me also tie it into the work that now I do. I'll say that for companies, they need to be very intentional about exposing people to site, And especially the big projects, not the token projects, Those projects that actually show your expertise. And even shadow and grow into it, but then get into it, So that's when these advertisements for promotions, which are very technical, they're what? They're based on your technical skills, you have confidence, you know? You've handled big projects. So when they ask for an interview, it becomes very hard. You can imagine you've been practicing for some years. You've not had a lot of experience in very big projects, and you're supposed to compete. You struggle, you know? Someone is talking about it a lot from experience, but for you it's more like what you've read, you know? So that is now how it shows later on that the numbers now dwindle. And I'll say that there are companies that are very, how do I put it, intentional about that. They're intentional, that they want to see women leading. They want, it's actually not just in engineering. You're talking about like at the executive committee, like our company, you'll find if our executive committee is 50-50, you know, they're very gender inclusive, you know, so that they show that this space is also for the women. And they take you for trainings, you go to site visits. So such things help navigate that space of engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about women falling off over the years because of some of these lack of technical skills, not because of meritocracy. But let's talk a little bit about something you said there, that sometimes they're given those light projects, the report writing, the go meet so and so. What would you say? Because there's also that bias, as you said, there's this vision that they have of an engineer, not just it being male, but sometimes even the woman they imagine looks a certain kind of way. So what has your experience been, and how do you approach it when it comes to the way you look? So you look feminine, and there are people who argue that in days gone by, it's like you have to look male so that you can take me seriously. And then there are others who are like, I'm a female and I bring this to the table. There's the emotional intelligence and so on and so forth. And so I'm not going to be, you know, all suited up just so that I can fit in. What is your take on that? And what would you say to other women who are in these technical fields who sometimes feel like, you know, you need to be manly?
Yeah, I'll say that it's actually something even that I experienced. When I started in the field, I am feminine, but I used to feel that I need to be masculine, you know? And there's a space for that, you know? When you go to sites, for sure you need to be in your hard hat, but I feel that if you've excelled in school, do not lose your personality in this career, you know? You can actually, in a way, say, so when I'm going to site, I'm going to be this. And when I leave site, I'm going to be something else, you know? Because it's also good for women to see this, to see the space where you can be, yes, as you say, the manly, you know, and also to see women who are feminine and in the field, because as I said, some of these skills are not really gender-based. When I think of like engineering, right now I'm a consultant engineer, yeah? And I can tell you that the skills that are needed are, you need to be good in maths. That one does not need you to wear like, you know, the hard hats. You need to be able to have people skills. You need to be able to think of like the T skills, that is like other fields. And so it's not just the engineering and you're going to site, yeah? I honestly feel that girls who feel that they can excel in this should show up as themselves, exactly as themselves. I think, in fact, the hardest part is usually trying to change. Because sometimes you meet people and they're like, you know, this is, especially I think when I was younger, it's like, hey, this is what an engineer is. And I used to try to be that, but you'll actually struggle with that because it's not maybe your personality. And I feel that the more that you show up as yourself, it's when you will excel in this career, you know? The career will find space for you and you'll find a way to work your personality into the career. I'll say that, yeah? Because even for me, if you find me on site, yes, I'll put on of course, the PPEs, the protective gear, you know? But after that, I feel like I'm a woman first, yeah, before I'm even an engineer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now we'll go to work-life balance in a bit, but take us through some of the things or requirements needed for each stage. So you talked about someone who graduates as an engineer, then a professional engineer, consulting engineer, and the different stages. So probably there's a lady who's watching here and she's probably pursuing that route. What does it look to get to each of these stages?
Okay. So like when you finish your degree, first of all, you should your degree should be accredited by the Engineers Board of Kenya. And so when you finish your first degree, you'll go to Engineers Board of Kenya and you'll get certified by 2 professional engineers, and then you'll get the certificate that you're now a graduate engineer, yeah? When you become a graduate engineer, you should practice under a professional engineer for a number of years to get the requisite hours, the ones I was talking about. It's actually months, and also to be able to do your design work and to write a report, and then you go and sit before the board for your professional exam. You have to demonstrate that you've been on site, that you've gotten the experience from a registered engineer. You sit the exam, and then now you become a professional engineer, and that is when now you're allowed to use the title of ENG. Okay, so after becoming a professional engineer, you'll practice in the field for, at the very least, 7 years, and then you go for another exam. Now they're going to look at mainly your contract management, the scope of projects you've handled, how big are they, you know? How much expertise have you gained in that year? And then now when you sit that exam, it's when you can be called a consulting engineer, yeah? So you become a professional engineer, then you practice in the field and you get some expertise. There has to be the scope of work is larger than for a professional engineer. It means that you can oversee large projects. Then now you become a consulting engineer. And also there's another level of the accredited checker, which is the highest level. The accredited checker now can oversee all of us, like the consulting engineers, the professional engineer, and they're usually sort of like, it's like the professor level of engineering, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so in your career, over 10 years in this industry, what has been your highlight? What is that one moment that stands out? I'm sure there are very many, but when you think through, what is 1 or 2 moments that stand out and you feel, yes, this was a good achievement?
Okay, I'll not talk, for me in my career, I'll not talk about like really the scope of projects. I'll talk about the projects that I've done, especially in the remote areas, and also the impact, I think, on the girls there. You know, whenever you go to a project in West Pokot, when you go to a project in Garissa, in Moyale, where it's not something that they've exposed to, like a female engineer, you know? And they're told that the engineer is coming for this project. And as I said, the expectations are always, he is coming, you know? And I like seeing that change in mindset in girls. It's so immediate. It's almost like, you know, they come to the site to visit, they want to see what is going on, and then they see in your hard heart. And the best part is actually you're also, as you said, maybe something that they don't perceive, like you're feminine. And you can see that, yeah, this is something that I can think of as a career. So I'll say that for me, the projects that are usually in remote areas, I feel that they touch me more. And I was actually very, I'll say, when I was working in REREC, I got to experience the country on a full scale. You know, the areas that you don't get to see. But now, when I was there, I got to see very remote areas. So those are good. I'll also talk about like projects that I've handled, like the Garissa solar power plant, which was the use of renewable energy. It was nice seeing it on a large scale, because it's also something, it ties my environmental studies, it ties my engineering. So when you start seeing like how renewable energy can be used on a larger scale in a new field, it's usually very eye-opening. So I'll say those are some of the projects.
Okay, yeah. And what has been one of your lows in this time of practicing as an engineer?
My lose, something I felt that
yeah, something, a project didn't go well, or just a personal, in your professional work. Is there something that, an instance that you experienced and was like,
Okay, I'll say that I have worked on, for me, imposter syndrome. I used to walk into rooms and sit at the back, especially at the start. You're like, those ones are the ones who know, you know? So as much as I said it's merit-based, and also it ties to site experience, you know, when someone is talking about a project that they have handled so in-depthly, you're in the same room, but you feel like they're the experts, but you're in the same room. So I know even for women and for me, there was imposter syndrome. And I'll say that it has helped to have people who have walked me through it. I'll talk about one of my mentors who quite literally put me in that space and used to make me give presentations all the time. It was something that I think he spotted very early that I was not comfortable doing, you know. So he would say, Yolanda, tomorrow you're presenting, you know. And at first I was very afraid, you know, you're presenting in front of big meetings. But at some point I was like, I am actually comfortable in this space. When I go to a board meeting, I will sit at the table, not, is there another row? We sit there, you know. And I think it's something that women actually, I don't know if it's unconsciously or consciously, do, that makes, it's like they're participants. We are here, but we are not the core, we are participating. So I'll say I've worked on my imposter syndrome, and I feel like that is a place that I felt was a weakness. I had very strong technical skills in the field, but the skills of, like, you know, being in front of big teams and people who I feel like, you know, have been in this field for longer, that is something that I felt I lacked, but I worked on it. And I think also in terms of leadership, it's something that that you should do. And I'll also say this I'll say women, like, put yourself in those uncomfortable situations. It will be uncomfortable at the start, you know, and then you'll get used to it. At some point, you'll be like, oh my gosh, it was not so bad. Sit at those tables, talk about the ideas you have. You'll be surprised, they might actually be right, you know. But don't have this fear of, you know, it's for others that I cannot. Yeah.
And I'd like you to zero in more on those tips, practical tips of getting over this imposter syndrome. So you said just put yourself there even if you're uncomfortable. But there might be a woman who's watching right now and thinking that, you know, they have those technical skills and they're good, but they're just putting themselves, they are spectators, you said, in their lives. Yeah, just there on the sideline. So give me 2 or 3 other tips for that woman who knows that she should be there, but she's just spectating.
Okay, I'll say that, first of all, I'll say upskill. If there's anything that you feel, this I am not good in, because especially, I'll say, like, now from my own experience, I've worked in different companies, and every time you move, it's a new field. You're in engineering, yes, but it is, like, let's say if you're in roads and you go to water, you go to structures, there are always new skills that you need to learn. It does not mean that you're not competent. It just means that you do not have the skill. And I'll say that you've talked about, like, education. I'm actually very intentional about it, because every time you move, there's a new skill that is required, and it can affect your confidence, yeah? So I'll say that you should very quickly learn how to upskill and reskill, you know? Sometimes it's something that you used to know, and you have to, like, know something else. And then sometimes you're like, okay, I'll go for this discussion, and they're talking about financial appraisal of a project. Go to school. Go to school, yeah. Just put it in your mind that, okay, I'm struggling in this aspect. It's something that I can learn, and you can acquire all these skills, yeah. So just work on your confidence. And I'll also say that in terms of, for women, confidence also, yeah? Because it's usually not that you don't know. I think for women, it's actually confidence. And I'll say that even in a study, like when you talk about imposter syndrome, they find that it affects women more. And it can be even things about how you look, you know, and other dynamics, you know. So I'll say that if there's anything that you feel will affect your confidence, I'll say that you also look at yourself and work on it in a way that is comfortable for you. And also, let me talk about something else that I think, I'll say mistakes. We are so afraid of making mistakes. Even me, actually, yeah. Sometimes it becomes even a hindrance. You know, there's something that's good for you, but you feel like, I was at this place, I made this mistake, I made this. I'll say that you should learn from your mistakes, but I feel like they should not define you, you know? And especially when you're thinking of, like, moving up the skill, there's also this aspect of you'll make a mistake or you'll fail at something. Learn how to use the people who are in that industry for long. Upskill very fast, whatever industry you're in, like, try to get the skills very fast. But don't let the mistakes that you make at the beginning define who you are. Be like, okay, this is what I am. Because it also talks about, I feel, it's also different seasons of your life, yeah? Like, there are things that you did in your 20s that now you're like, was that me, you know? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a season of your life. And if you did not make those mistakes, you might make them, like, later, you know? So I'll say that for women, they carry a lot of guilt. It's almost something, it's like, and I feel that for other people, people move past it. But for women, they'll be like, I did this 5 years ago, I did this. And it also shows up like in the workplace. So you find that even when they're told like apply for this job, they're like, I need to have everything. I need to tick everything, you know? And in fact, if I can tick and add, you know? Yeah, but sometimes just show up just the way you are, show up with your qualifications. If there's something that you feel like you need to work on that, upskill regularly, you know? And I think that eventually you'll succeed.
Yeah, so you must upskill. Education is the answer to everything. Knowledge is very important. Now let's talk about work-life balance. And before we even do that, you mentioned a mentor who held your hand and took you to those rooms. Do you want to shout them out? Do you want to shout them out?
Actually, let me shout out my mentors.
He held your hand.
I think I want to shout out my mentors, yeah. I'll say that, and I'll start from very far. Now my story. I feel like my first my mom and dad. First my mom and dad, yeah. My mom was my maths teacher, and she still is. She still is. She gives me discipline. Like sometimes when I don't know how to do something, you know, she's a teacher. She's a teacher, and I think it's lifelong. So I feel like I've always had an inbuilt teacher. When I feel like I actually sound off, not sound off, I actually ask her many things every day. So I'll say thanks to my mom. I'll also talk about my dad. My dad has been very instrumental in the choices of my career. When I was in high school, people never used to picture like women a lot. You can imagine those numbers of 4 out of 40, you know, we were very few. But my dad never saw that, you know. He was like, she's good in engineering, as she is, you know, and she's going to pursue it. And we are 6 girls, and all of us have pursued courses that are very strongly linked to mathematics, yeah? We have professors in our family, we have accountants, you know, we've leaned towards like math, and I think that's because of my mom and also my dad just seeing that this is something that that girls can pursue, yeah? So I'll start with that. I want to shout out teachers, yeah? I want to shout out my teachers. I'll say this, when I was in primary school, there was a teacher, and can I say names?
Yes,
I can say names. Let me shout them out. Let me shout them out, yes. My class 8 teacher was Mrs. Mambo. I was a very sporty kid when I was a kid, when I was in primary school. I promise you, if it was swimming, football, like anything, you know, anything where there's sports that I can be like playful. And I used to see like that is my side. I was good in maths, but I used to see like I'm more playful. But Mrs. Mambo used to tell me like, you know, Yolanda, you're going to go far, you know? And I think that stuck with me. And she used to tell me I'm very good in sciences and pursue it. Of course, that time it was just science. And she really spoke to me a lot. And I feel like I excelled. I had this thing of, I cannot let her down and I'll be good at this because she said that. So I shout out Mrs. Mambo. I'll shout out my physics teacher in high school. That is Mr. Kimilu. Mr. Kimilu was also very instrumental. He used to give us extra work. And believe it or not, me in physics, I used to enjoy it. Like, I think even then, like my timetable, I think like 70% was physics. You know those timetables you put for yourself? Huh? Yeah. You know those ones you draw for yourself, like after preps, in the morning, you know, at lunchtime. I used to even go at lunchtime, like, I'm honestly that girl who used to be like, can I get more physics, you know? So Mr. Kimilu, and I'll say about my high school teacher, we were in a girls' school, but I promise you, he never used to make us feel like these are for boys. He just used to say like, you're going to pass. And in our school, the girls who did physics, we got A's. It was like a thing. It was a thing. We just used to know we'll do well in it. So Mr. Kimilu, thank you. Yeah. Okay. I don't remember her name, but I feel like I need to mention her. When I was in Strathmore has this thing, I don't know if it still has it, where the moment you join, you're given a student counselor. I don't know if it's still there, but that time it was. And you know, when you're joining, like when I was doing my accounts, I could not see the bigger picture. I was like, I finished Form 4, I'm waiting for my results, you know? this is something to do in between, like the CPAs. But she used to make me see like, this can tie in into other careers. Then that time we'd not gotten our results when we were assigned this like student counselor, but we used to meet her I used to meet her every 2 weeks. It was part of the requirements. And when I was called for engineering, she actually told me like, hey, you need to do this one because one day when you become an engineer, you're going to need like financial literacy in terms of like projects. So I don't remember her name, but thank you. Someone else I want to shout out. Okay, before I go to my work, let me talk about like my school. My supervisors right now, that's Dr. Mary Mwenda and Dr. Anthony Ndumu, who have walked my path of my PhD. But I'll start with this. When I was doing my master's, I did well, but I thought that is where I'm going to reach. I'm like, for sure, in terms of work, you need a master's, yeah? So I was like, when I'm done with this, that's it. And Dr. Mary Mwenda was like, Yolanda, you've done very well in this. You can continue. And it's the first time I actually had this idea of, there's also PhD, yeah? And so I started the course, and she's now my supervisor, and I'm walking that journey with her, and I really appreciate her, yeah. That's my school, huh? Now, in terms of my work, I'll also shout out my mentors, yeah? And I think I'll also include my peers, because there's one person who, mentorship is not just your bosses and, I can say the names?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I'll say, when you join the ministry, you're put in offices together, And it's really nice to walk that journey with someone who is trying to understand this field, the challenges, the site visits. And I want to shout out Engineer Beth Stanley, Kipyegon, yeah. We worked together so well. Like, we encouraged each other. Like, are you going for your registration? Let's write the reports together. What challenges did you find on site? How did you overcome them? And even when I got stuck somewhere, he was like a sounding board. Like, how would you handle this? So thank you so much, Engineer Beth. I'll also talk about Engineer Nyanga, Hilary Nyanga. He was my supervisor when I was in the ministry. And that time, I tell you, like in terms of the hours of registration, it was very difficult to get them, but he was very intentional that for women, these first 3 years, before the family comes in, I'll send you to site, You'll go to site, you're going to get the hours of site supervision, and then yes, you're working on the report, but he was very intentional that we need to get those site visits. So he'd send us to site. And also, when I was now ready to do my professional exam, it was something that I didn't feel I was ready. And you know what he told me? He's like, in 2 weeks, I want to see your report here, And 2 weeks later, for sure, I had my report, and I went for the exam, and I passed. So some of these things, like sometimes you're like, I'll do it next year. He's like, why next year? 2 weeks, bring it here. So thank you so much, Engineer Hilary Nyanga, and also just for that foundation for me. So now I'll shout out the person who made me, he actually even till now puts me in those rooms. He puts me in those rooms, When you go for meetings, he'll actually intentionally be like, okay, Yolanda is presenting for us today, and that is someone I work with, and that's Paul Njuguna. Yeah, Paul Njuguna puts me in those rooms. He gets me out of my comfort zone. He makes me expand, I feel. Can I say he makes me? Yeah, I've expanded, like, in terms of, like, my limits. I feel like now, what I feel is a limit, he's like, you can do more. So thank you, Paul Njuguna. Yeah.
Thanks, and I think it's important to shout those people out because we're not self-made. You need people to hold your hand and walk you through that journey. So that's good.
I think let me also interject because I think there are people I still want to mention. I'll talk about and I'll shout them out again. In terms of role models, we have the first female Engineering Board of Kenya CEO right now, and it was good to see her because sometimes I'll say representation matters. It's good to see women in those spaces, seeing what they're doing, excelling in them. And you might not have that one-on-one, you know. However, just seeing that she's in that space, seeing how she's navigated, and that's Engineer Margaret Ogai. And I'll also talk about the chair of ASEC now, who's also a lady for the first time, and that is Engineer Jane Mutilili. So for me, those, as much as I've not worked in the same spaces, I know for women like now who are coming up in engineering, they were sort of like that later, that you see like, okay, this is sort of like the direction that we're going to go. This is how far we can go, the challenges that they faced, how they've overcome them. So I think for them, the CEO of EBK right now and the chair of ASEC right now, for the first time being both female. So, and throughout my career, I have seen them, you know. I remember starting out and we used to be told there's Engineer Margaret Ogai, you know. And we'd meet her, we'd see her in meetings, when we go for conferences. It was good to see women in that leadership space then, and rising now all the way to CEO and chair. So I'll also shout them out.
Great work.
Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about work-life balance or integration. You talked about those critical years, those critical 3 years, and like Nyanga just pushing you to make sure you get through that, and many other women. How has it been for you being in a very technical field? You need to be on site, you need to be doing this and that. How have you been able to prioritize your career growth and not miss out on that, as well as your personal life?
Okay, I'll tell you. For me, I work with a timetable, I work with a planner. What else do we do nowadays? We do vision boards. I'm very good at vision boards. In fact, I think my December is, what am I doing next year? And I actually run my life like a project. I will tell you the time, the cost, the scope, and the quality, like everything. I'll put it out there like, I'll do this on Saturday. It will cost me this much. This is the activity that I'll be doing, and this is the quality I want to get from it. So I'll say that when, especially like if you're in the technical space where you travel a lot out of maybe your site, you know, because for engineering, you will travel, yeah? When you're engineering, you're not building things here. You're going to where they're not there, so you'll travel. So you have to be a very good planner. You have to be very good at planning and also prioritizing things, you know? You have to say like, on Saturday, I'm doing this, and be intentional about it. Not strict, but be intentional. Because if you don't, you'll first of all get fatigue. And I think even planning for rest. You'll be like, okay, when I come back from site, today I'm not doing anything. And that is planned for. You'll not call me and say, you know? Yeah, so there's the planning. I'll say for me personally, now, I wake up, I'm a night owl. In fact, for me, and I'm not advocating like, you know, but this is me. I work from 2 to 6. Yeah.
2 a.m.
2 a.m. And this is me.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm the kind of person you'll find an email at 8. You know, I schedule emails. you get it to the office at like 8 a.m.
Yes.
because I work on reports at night. I used to see like before, like, okay, I sleep enough hours, I feel. So regularly from 2, I'll wake up, I sleep at 9. Till 2. 2 a.m. I'm awake by the. In fact, we can have a very good and long conversation, but that just works for me. It works for me. You know, I'm not saying that it's for everyone.
5 hours.
Yeah, it works for me.
For you,
It works for me. And I know it's not conventional, but it works for me. But it has, I used to sit before like, you're always up so early, and I'd watch movies. And then I was like, you know what, I can actually do my studies at this time. So you'll find even PhD, like when the supervisor is asking, I'm like, at 8 a.m. you'll have it, you know? So I use those hours a lot. But in terms of work life, I'm also a planner, but I also know that I try to make use of the hours before work quite a bit so that the day does not catch up with you. Yeah.
Okay. So what's on your vision board 2026? That you can tell us. That you can share.
Almost done with my PhD. I hope I will.
Or you should be finishing this year?
Yes, I should be finishing this year. So I'm now a PhD candidate, so I'll say that is on my vision board strongly. What else that I can tell you?
That you can tell me.
Learn how to play golf. Yeah, I've been a member at a golf club for many years, and I've never like really prioritized it. So I'm trying to get in more fitness. But I think now when I look at fitness, I'm looking at it like more holistically, like something that you can do. You know, before, as I said, seasons of life. In your 20s, it was, for me, the gym, you know. Now I'm like silence, you know. I want to do an activity which fits in more into like my life. So I like now there's planning to play more golf, which is also scheduled. Yeah. Vision board, spend more time with my family. Yeah. I do it already. In fact, I incorporate it a lot in my own activities. But I'll say that now I want to be intentional. Like Sunday we're doing this. Yeah. So I'll say those are the things that are now in my vision board.
Okay, you've heard it from Yolanda Muyonga. This has been She Means Business. I have been your host, Claire Munde. Until next time, have a good one.